there's an opportunity too for most schools to establish some way to really encourage user-generated content, meaning content that is coming from your students and your parents. So if you haven't given thought to that, I just want to throw that out there because, we feel like this pressure to create all this content, but don't forget your clients are like the best content creators ever. And if you can come up with ways to either get that content from them or encourage them to create that content and tag your studio, that's taking a little bit of pressure off of you and the social media team.
Hey, welcome back to Seven Figure Music School. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that we really haven't talked about so far on the podcast. We might have spoken about it generally, but we've not gone in depth. And that's the role that social media plays in your school's marketing. So to talk about it, we brought on a social media marketing expert that many of you might know, and it's Sara Campbell of SavvyMusicStudio.com. And we've got a lot of questions for you, Sara. And so I hope by the end here, we're going to get to the bottom of a number of questions, including how to use social media for lead generation, most effective ways to use social media, and delegating social media marketing to your team. So thanks for coming on, Sara. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, Daniel and Nate. I'm really excited to chat about this. I love to geek out about social media, so this is my happy place.
Cool. So for this interview, I want to assume that people know the basics of social media. They don't need to understand like the difference between a business page and a personal page, those sorts of things. We are going to geek out a little bit more like you just said there. And to start out, I'd like to imagine a busy school owner, okay? Maybe they have 100 students, 200, possibly even 300 students. They're already getting a decent number of leads per month, and they call in a social media expert. And they want to know what a successful social media strategy would be for their school. That's the question they have for you. Maybe they've even booked a call with you, Sara, since you do work with clients, that sort of thing. What do you say to them? Where do you push back? What's that conversation look like?
So I love this question because I do get a lot of people that come to me with questions about, okay, well, what does a good social media strategy actually look like? And so typically what I start with is I'm looking at all their channels and I'm doing a quick audit just to get an idea of like, where are you? What are you actually doing? And to get an idea of, okay, how well versed are they in organic marketing styles? Because truly that's what social media is, right? It's for the most part about organic marketing. Sure, you can toss money into it if you want, but if your organic marketing isn't on point, the money that you run in ads and things like that you may not get a good return on your investment. So I think the first thing that I say to them is, it's really about quality and not quantity. And we need to learn how to actually measure what is quality on social media.
What is quality on social media then?
Wow. I'm so glad you asked. So one of the basic ways that we can measure this, right? If we want to think about, what are the measurable objectives that we're trying to achieve here? We are looking at, are people actually, number one, seeing your stuff? Okay, so we're looking at the number of views on posts. Number two, and the important part, are they engaging with your content? If you're putting a lot of content out there and it's not getting views, and let's assume that you have a decent number of followers or likes or whatever the platform wants to call it. You have a decent number of people who could potentially be watching you. But if you're not getting any views, if you're not getting engagement on your posts, then there's something wrong with the strategy. And that's when we need to revisit what's the type of content you're putting out there? What's the frequency of content that you're putting out there?
Okay. So then here's a question that naturally comes up in my mind. And I'm being very serious about this because, Sara, you and I have talked for many years off and on. And my background really is more in pay-per-click advertising, which of course there's an aspect of that is social media based. But I really started on Google, and Google's kind of my home platform. When you're thinking about the advice you'd give to a school or a studio, would you have them primarily use, and I don't know, if you don't even like the question, I want you to correct the question, because you might not even like the question, but would you have them use social media more to generate leads or more to build engagement with an audience that is there, or perhaps it's both? Because I hear you talk about measurement, and that I love that, but what would you have them do first in terms of how to use their social media channels?
Okay, so this like perfectly transitions into the second point about like where do you push back, right? So beautiful question. I push back in the most odd way, and it kind of like it makes people pause and go like, oh, does she know what she's talking about? And my advice is this: stop marketing to prospective clients.
Interesting.
And I know, right? Social media gives us this beautiful opportunity to build community and to celebrate what's actually happening in the studio. And oftentimes we look at social media as just simply not just a marketing platform, because there's a big difference between marketing and advertising, right? People treat it as an advertising platform where they're going to post stuff like I have openings or join this class or things like that. But if we can shift that strategy and actually start marketing to our current clients rather than only marketing to prospectives, then we have this opportunity to really let people understand what the studio culture is like. And, how much we value our current clients, how much we value our employees. And that is going to really help people get their studio to stand out.
So, Sara, this is such an awesome point, because between my co-founder and myself, it's oftentimes a point of tension. She's like, we need to do less marketing and more nurturing. Mm-hmm. And being the person who's oftentimes running the marketing and sales team, I'm hyper aware of my leads. I'm hyper aware of conversions. I'm hyper aware of how close we are literally as of this morning to hitting our enrollment targets for the opening of the fall, right? And yet the comment you made is so on point to me at a program like BMF, because we're so proud of how we deliver on our promise, right? In other words, the programs we're offering, the types of faculty that we're hiring, training, and retaining, these are all ways that we're able to deliver on what we're promising, which is to inspire these families and to build a community, right? So I think the opening question I have is just, how do you get a founder like myself to actually change their mindset, right? If I'm so numbers and sales driven, I mean that in the best way, because I just want more families that we can help, right? How do you actually get someone like me to be like, Nate, this is going to be a few-month process, but I need to get you to imagine your messaging differently?
Okay, this is perfect, because I've had that pushback before where people are like, this sounds a little risky. It's very different from what we've been doing. And like you said, first and foremost, you got to give it time. Because organic marketing, unlike paid advertising, it's a slow grow. But then what I really like to educate people about is the power of story. And storytelling is one of the best types of marketing. And if we can tell stories about the successes that our clients are experiencing, the amazing events that we're putting on, and we can tell stories about, hey, we just brought on this brand new employee and we're so excited to have this new guitar teacher. If we can tell stories like that and give people a bigger picture and a more full and rich and colorful picture of what it's like to be a part of your school, then it becomes a no-brainer. What I love is that organic marketing works hand in hand with paid advertising, because if people are seeing your stuff and they're engaging with your stuff, well, if you got your pixels set up, if you got all the things right, they're going to then start seeing ads about your studio. And they've already been nurtured. They've already gone, oh, yeah, I see what Nate's doing over there, and it looks pretty dang awesome. Then when they see that ad pop up, they're like, oh, yeah, I meant to click on this, or I meant to do something. And this, I'll add to that, this is also not to say that organic marketing and storytelling can't have clear calls to action in them and have some type of a conversion goal in mind, but it's just a different way of doing it.
Okay, so love it. I heard two things, and then I want to go back to the mindset question.
Sure.
Dig it? Because Daniel and I work with a whole bunch of amazing school owners, and we hear from them all the time, and many of them are not storytellers. I mean, they tell a good story to us. They're like, here are the pain points in growing our school. They're good at telling that story, right? But they're sort of like the Genesis story is very similar. They're very comfortable in the studio with their students and discovering that student story and nurturing them. But the idea of then turning around and having to get on stage to broadcast the story is really, I think, honestly, it's not an authentic space. So I kind of go back to the mindset question. Like, in your work with clients, what are the stages of transition or transformation for an owner to go from someone who's really focused on their students to someone who's a storyteller and able to talk about the transformation to the public rather than just to the parent?
Yeah, this is good because it takes practice to do this. And oftentimes when we think of storytelling from a personal perspective, and there is an element of vulnerability inside of telling a story, because a story typically has, like, it starts with a struggle, and there's something that, maybe wasn't so great. And then we have this turning point, and then we have this transformation at the end. And when we're doing that personally, that can feel uncomfortable. So I think we oftentimes associate the idea of storytelling with, like, kind of bearing our secrets and putting ourselves out there in an uncomfortable space. The good thing here is that, as a multi-teacher studio, the storytelling shifts a bit, because part of the goal is to get that it's not about you. It's about the school. It's about your employees. And so then we get to step into the role of observer and celebrator. So if we can start thinking about observing what's happening in the rooms down the hall, and having our employees or independent contractors, depending on how you're set up, there's all kinds of things to talk about there. But if we can start observing that and learning to record it, not just via video, but like writing things down and making observations, and then being able to take those observations and think about how can I use this to communicate what really sets us apart from other people, and to take those observations and then celebrate them on social media.
In schools where you've seen what you just described happen, what do you see often as the measurable outcomes for doing that well?
One of the big things that I see, if you're playing your cards right here, because we're circling back to stop always marketing to perspectives. Start marketing to your current clients. When you are able to then bring more storytelling into your marketing, then we have this opportunity to then share those stories with parents. And then we start seeing a real clear shift, because we can start to see, like, if you, let me give a really clear example. Let's say that you have a guitar student who has been in the studio for a couple of years and has been working on a piece that was really, a big challenge for them. And recital time rolls around and this student just nails it. I mean, they're up there on stage and they just nail it. And they are like grins ear to ear. And you've talked to the teacher that they've worked with. You have part of that story. You have part of that video clip of this student on stage. And you're able to tell a story about here's what happens when you put in the work. Here's what happens when you're brave enough to step up on stage. And we can give you the tools to do that. And when you send that story off to a parent, like you literally take that post and you send it to the parent just to say, hey, wanted to let you know, Tommy's up on the social media page today. That parent is not just going to like that. They are going to be sharing it to people. They're going to be shouting it, from the rooftops. And so we start to see engagement shift. We start to see, more people seeing it. We start to see people commenting on it and going, Aunt Dorothy's out there going, go, Tommy, go. That's so exciting. I'm so proud of you. Even though she couldn't come to the recital because she lives in Idaho and you're in New York.
Yes. Yeah. Well, let me even follow up on that and say that what you're even describing there in measurable terms, what it comes down to is reach and engagement. Because I did something in my own studio, which of course is not nearly as big as Nate's. But when I had those successes, or I found those fun stories or cute stories, and had the mindset that when those things happened, I'm going to make sure that I have a playbook for getting those stories out. I'm going to tell one of those things here in just a second. I would post that to social media. I would then take the link, email the parent and say, hey, really proud of their performance. Just wanted you to see it. Send the email to them. Then I would come back to social media the next day and I'll see it's been shared so many times and it's all from the family members and it's seen by 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 people, which if I had to pay for that engagement, that would start to rack up. And I got that for free, so to speak. Sure, it was my time. It was having the imagination to do that. But a lot of times it was just a matter of me having the willingness and the media releases in place to just be able to whip out my phone and video a performance that I knew was going to be really great with a student. And then just sharing it to a couple platforms, which I could often do right from my phone. I don't know how helpful this is, but I'm going to tell this anyway. There was one day that I had a student and I don't know what got into me, but I would engage with my students in the context of my group lessons. And I asked this one girl, I said, she was 11. I said, hey, what's your favorite song? I've been kind of going around the room and asking what the favorite song was as I was working with these kids this particular day. And without hesitation, this 11-year-old, like, she just whipped her head and looked at me so fast. She said, Living on a Prayer by Bon Jovi. What is this? That was a social media post. So I literally got the album cover from their Living on a Prayer album, and then I made like this little picture. You can still find it on my old studio Facebook page with her and just told that story right there. And I sent it to the parent. It got good engagement. You just have to be in a position where you're thinking about these things in this way, or you're freeing up your staff and giving your staff the space to do this stuff too. That's what I think. I'm curious what else you might add to that or where you'd go from here, Sara.
I think you've really hit the nail on the head. And Daniel, I think I saw that post. I seem to remember the Living on a Prayer post.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
I think that what you just said there is really beautiful because, it kind of comes back to what we mentioned earlier. We, as teachers, we are so focused on being in the moment and being there with our students and the education part of things. And it can be a challenge to remember to document so that you do have, that you do have material, you have content that you can share later. And that's, so I would add to that, what I would add is have your phone handy and actually make it hands-free. Because I know, like for me, I don't like to have my phone in my hand while I'm teaching. That feels like a disconnect for me. And so what I've done over the years is I actually have a mic stand with a phone holder on it. And I can put my phone up in there. And then I just tell my students are so used to this now. Like when they do something super cool, I'm like, all right, Maddox. And I don't know why, but I always use Maddox as an example. This is one of my real students. I'm like, okay, Maddox,
Nice.
That was killer. I want to see you do that again. We're going to press record. And he gets so excited about it because then he wants to watch the video afterwards, which is a great opportunity in and of itself because we don't often watch ourselves play or watch ourselves sing. So that is part of the education. And they're so accustomed to taking pictures of things and taking videos of things that it's not foreign to kids nowadays.
Sara, can I rewind tape to a comment you made before too, just about the retargeting? Because in prep, Daniel and I were going back and forth and creating a bunch of questions, and then you just hit on one of my questions there, which was sort of a chicken and an egg question. Like, is it essential that a school owner actually understands retargeting, has something like ad roll set up or whatever they're using, so that before they even begin to observe, celebrate, create social posts, because as you put it, one feeds the other? Is that like an essential learning curve for our listeners? Like, hey, figure out retargeting before you really dive in deep. What are your thoughts on that?
This is a good one. So I'm going to say both yes and no. It really depends on where your studio is at that time and what the goals are. But I would say It's a great idea. I mean, if it's not in your personal wheelhouse, which for most of us it's not, setting up retargeting ads, setting up like the new Meta Pixel, which I got an email about like just yesterday. Setting those things up for many people, that's like not their favorite place to be. However, if you have the budget to hire somebody to set up some retargeting, even if just, you set that pixel up on your website so that somebody who comes through that social media channel and they do go to your bio and they click on something or they click on a link that you've put into a post, they can be retargeted later because, now we can consider them a warm lead. And that's going to be really nice because then you can think about when you're coming into your ad funnel, you have ads for people that are cold leads. They've never seen you or anything like that. They just come through a Google search and maybe you come at the top. Versus the people who are following you on social media, they've engaged with your content, they've maybe gone to your website, and now you can retarget them as a warm lead because they've already shown interest. So I do think it's important. It just depends on where you are in setting up that funnel.
Right. In other words, if your studio is healthy right now and you're using social media as a retention tool for your current families, well, then maybe you don't need to get bogged down in retargeting. But if you're in a growth plan, and you're trying to move, say, from 100 to 250 students, then maybe retargeting is worth investing in. And, Daniel and I talk all the time about building teams and trying to figure out when it's a one and done thing where you can bring in a contractor off of Upwork or something like that, or is it an ongoing project? And so I think a lot of our listeners will listen to your last comment and be like, oh, I definitely am not the person who wants to figure out the metapixel. Like, I heard you say that, and I was like, I definitely am not the person who wants to figure out the metapixel. But is this something where you should take the time to hire slowly, find the right expert that can help you because you're going to have an ongoing relationship? Or is it someone who can come in and sort of set you up once, and then maybe you ping them next year when you're refining your website? What type of role is this?
So I think I see kind of two directions here. First, if you already have a web developer working with you, then that is certainly something that most web developers are very well versed in. If they are doing some social media and like ad work on the side. So if you already have somebody that's on your team or an independent contractor, then by all means use them to set that up, because things like that take time to generate an audience. And it's not like you can set something like that up and then like start running ads the next week. It's going to take months to generate, enough data. But if you don't have anybody on your team yet, and you are, like you said, in growth mode, then it would make more sense to be careful with, putting a job description out there, maybe interviewing a couple of people and thinking about taking somebody on who can set that up and start then the process of getting your advertising in place.
Nice. And you've referenced the patience required with any type of organic marketing. And this sounds like another sort of tool in your organic marketing box is the retargeting. How do you frame it to your clients when you're trying to, let's say I'm working with you and you're trying to develop patience with me. You're like, Nate, this takes time. Mm-hmm. What kind of time? Like, let's say I'm all in, I'm creating content, and you're like, Nate, we need to stick this out, 6 months, 12 months. Like, I mean, for example, when someone comes to work with Daniel and I, a school owner, we're pretty clear. We're like, this is a 12-month commitment because there's so many we're working on all 4 buckets of the business. We really need to patiently work through this. What's the kind of time that how much patience do I need as an owner to really develop my organic marketing and see a return on that?
So I think it depends on, like, when somebody comes to me and they're asking these questions, it depends on where I see where they are right now. Like, so once we run that audit and we figure out, like, okay, what's going well, what's not going well. Like, if you have some things that are going pretty smoothly and, like, we need some small tweaks that are going to get you to that next level, maybe we're looking at 3 months. But if I look at, what's being set up, if there are no social channels, if there are no, if nothing's being done, then we're looking at probably a minimum of 6 months and more likely a year. But what I can say is, over the years when I've worked with people, I try to, as best I can, keep lines of communication open after people are done with programs and things like that. And people always feel welcome to, like, send me DMs, because when something really cool happens, they're like, Sara, guess what happened? And I've followed so many people throughout the years, and then they come to me like a year later and they say, I really can't believe this, because, like, when we first started talking, I couldn't even get, like, any attention on social media at all. And now, since I've done, and it's not just social media that's bringing it in, it's other marketing changes that we've made. But, like, now that I've done these things and I've been consistent with them and been patient with them, my studio is full. Now I'm starting a waiting list. And that's really exciting.
Right.
Then the question I would maybe follow up with, without giving away all the secret sauce, but kind of keeping it at a high level, I wonder what those things are that you're having them do. In other words, it's no secret when I talk that people know that if they were, let's say, come work with me, they're going to learn about the Google Big Three, and they're going to learn how to do those really, really well. That's not the secret. It's in what you're actually doing with those. So I'm curious, how do you conceive of educating that school owner to be a effective social media team for themselves, and or maybe bringing in other people around them? Like, what is it that you're actually having them do? Again, at a high level.
So, building on what you said, I know that the big Google 3 are your things. Same. I mean, we talk about that. Actually, we typically focus in on the 2 without the ads to begin. And then we're looking at first, so that we can get, because at that point there may be issues with the website, there may be issues with social media channels, and I don't want them running ads yet if they don't have a place to bring people and a lovely place to bring people.
Yeah.
Right. So we focus on that, and then on the social media side, what are the tasks involved? The tasks are starting to get comfortable with curating content, which most of us are not content creators by natural existence. We are not content creators. So learning to become a content creator, or curator rather.
Yes.
And learning to create some type of a regular posting schedule for yourself. And when we're doing that, we're really digging deep into what is the brand, what are you trying to communicate to people, and really getting specific about who you are marketing to, because typically what I see is like very watered down marketing. And I don't, when I first go to like a social media channel, I can't understand who they're trying to attract.
Interesting.
And so that's the big task. I think that's one of the hardest things at first is to get really specific about what you want.
Oh yeah.
Sarah, this raised a question that came up with Daniel and I in advance of doing this podcast with you, which was oftentimes it feels like the founder is the one with that really clear voice. Mm-hmm. They understand the why. They're pretty clear on their purpose. They may not know how to share it well, but they're really, really committed to that. And how do you actually get them to share that effectively with a team member so that you can arrive at a consistent, like you said, step 3 was you need to commit to a regular schedule. Mm-hmm. Right. And that commitment to a regular schedule is going to mean that likely the founder or the studio owner is going to have to step away at some point. They can be a curator, they can be capturing content, but they can't be the one who's really owning and accountable to the regular posts. Have you had any strategies that have worked well with other owners on how to get another team member to get the message and the voice and be hyper-targeted on who they're talking to? Any strategies that work well, or can you walk us through how to get that team member up to speed on it?
Sure. So, I mean, I think one of the first things that I would encourage an owner to do is to be able to, one, find somebody who you trust, right? Find somebody who is willing to sit down with you and who can dedicate the time they involved to understand what is the studio mission, what is the studio culture, and to be able to communicate to them, because I mean, as the owner, you're asking the big whys or the big whats, what kind of a difference do I want to make in the world? And how am I going to do that inside of the school? So, somebody who's going to help you take this daily schedule, social media schedule off of your plate needs to have a very clear understanding about the values that you hold, the values that the studio culture holds. And so I think the first thing as a studio owner, if you do want to be able to get this stuff off your plate, which I think almost everybody does, because this is not where you should be spending your time. Right? Like, I think, Daniel, I listened to a podcast where you guys were talking about, I think it was you, or it might have been you, Nate, sitting on the couch during football games and during the commercials, having to like post stuff.
That was Daniel, I think.
Yep. And the thing was about that was that I didn't mind for a long, long time, but then it eventually got to a point where I was so busy doing a lot of other stuff, even outside my studio, that I just said, I don't want to do that anymore. I enjoyed it at one point, and then when I stopped enjoying it, I wanted to hand it off. And yeah. Go ahead, though. Sorry.
I think a lot of people, like, we do enjoy that at first because it's like this new challenge. You're trying to figure out like what works, what doesn't work, and you're also having fun because, I mean, it's cool to celebrate your clients. I mean, that feels good. And so at first we're trying to figure this out, and we're doing it ourselves. And then, like you said, it stops being fun and it starts being work. And when you've hit that wall, then it's time to, give that piece of work to someone else. And I think what I would suggest is, making sure that you have a really clear employee handbook that has all kinds of good information in there so that people can understand even some basic things that will allow them to craft good social media copy. What is the tone that we use? What are the hashtags that we use? But honestly, if you're hiring somebody to do this, they should be well-versed in hashtags. But just to give them a good foundation of what you expect.
Yes. I want to put a pin in something you said there, Sara, about if you're hiring someone, because that really gets down to another question that Nate and I kind of both wanted to ask before. I want to use this opportunity, though, to say something that I don't know when the next time we'll do a podcast episode on social media marketing. I don't know when we'll do one next. So I want to put this in here. And I don't know, you might even have pushback against this or might have something to add to it. But when I talk to school owners, and I'm not necessarily niche down in any particular thing, I tend to act more as an overall business and marketing consultant. What I will tell them, or what I will ask them, is what social media networks do you already tend to spend a lot of time? Because that's probably where you should start doing content first, because you understand that platform. So for me, I have always been a YouTube guy and an Instagram guy. I have no business presence on Instagram, but I have a big business presence on YouTube. And what I would say is that you begin to understand how things work in that channel, and that is likely where you should begin and start engaging with current customers and potential customers, potentially, as a first step to making this more of a priority, because it's already hard enough to add, quote unquote, another thing to your plate. Better that you don't have a really steep learning curve because everyone says, oh, you should be on TikTok, but you literally have never even downloaded the app. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea 6 months from now, but if you're wanting to move on something now, it's probably a good idea to go where you're already familiar with the rules and how it works. Would you add anything to that, Sara, or maybe push back on that? I'm curious.
I'm going to push back and I'm going to add. I actually think that that's a really good idea. At first I think, you're already in that sandbox. You're comfortable. You know what the toys are that are there. Play in that sandbox and have fun, because it all comes back to, I used to have this bumper sticker hanging on the wall here, and it was Ben and Jerry's. If it's not fun, why do it? Right. Nice. If it's not fun, why do it? I think that's kind of my philosophy around using social media. It should be fun, and you should enjoy at least parts of it. So definitely start where you're comfortable. And where I'm going to push back, though, is we want to really have a really clear understanding about where your ideal clients spend time, because, well, first off, you picked a good platform. Everybody uses YouTube. And actually YouTube, I would not even label YouTube as social media. I'd label that as a search engine, which, and with some social aspects to it.
I can't get away from it. I'm always doing search engines.
You are. That's wonderful. So, start where you're comfortable, but then also build awareness around where do my ideal clients spend time. And when I say ideal clients, I'm talking about both current and prospective. And for most school owners, we're talking about the parents. We're not necessarily talking about the children, unless you specialize in older teens. I mean, once they hit that 14, 15, 16 range, they are probably going to be the ones who are telling mom and dad, hey, I want to do this thing. Or they're actually going to be the ones that are reaching out. I'm thinking especially of voice students, when they are hitting that time in high school where they're like, oh man, I need to up my audition game. And they are the ones seeking out help. But so know who your ideal clients are. And if you're not sure where those people are spending time, we have data on that. I mean, go to the Pew Research Center and look at what are the age ranges of people and genders that you're going to find on different platforms. I did a huge amount of research on this last year and compiled all this data on, okay, these are the people that spend time on Facebook. Here's who you're going to reach on Instagram. Here's who you're going to reach on YouTube, Quora, Reddit, all of the platforms. And it's interesting because every platform's different. So start with where you're comfortable and then build awareness as to where do my ideal clients live? What's that next platform that I might want to start adding into my strategy? So if MySpace is your
favorite platform, that might not be the best place to start. You got to go where the customers are.
Yeah, if you're still hanging out on MySpace, we need to have a chat.
Yeah, exactly. Well, maybe that's a good place to transition to something I think Nate brought up 5-10 minutes ago. And maybe this is where we kind of drive things towards the close. And it's around the idea of that delegation piece. Mm-hmm. I think the question I would ask you, because I think I already know what you're going to say. I don't think the owner can ever truly delegate this completely off. They have to hold, they're the one with the vision. They're the one who carries the flame, that sort of thing. They can kind of push this down the ladder. For my part, I think I know how to answer this. I wonder how you would answer this. Because for me, if I were going to delegate this, depending on the circumstances, I might delegate it to someone who's on my team already if I knew that they could do a good job with it. I could also envision delegating aspects of this to someone outside the team. What do you see as challenges there? What do you think about that? A bit of advice. Again, I'm open to pushback. That's why we had you on. I'm curious what you think about that, and then maybe we kick it over to Nate. I'm sure he has some questions about delegation too. But yeah, curious what you think.
Sure. I have so many examples that I can think of here because, I work as a content creator myself, and I'm also, delegating to my own virtual assistant, Caitlin. She's fantastic. And I work for other teams where, I'm functioning as the CMO and, working with the social media manager there. And so I think the best bit of advice I can give is whether you decide to hire in-house or out of house, your job as the owner is to get clear on, it comes back to what I said before, expectations, and have a way to communicate those and have a way that you can check on stuff. So if you want this to be successful when you're handing this off, we need to have clear SOPs around here's what this let's give some examples of SOPs for this. Here's what the weekly schedule looks like. This is what's expected every week. Okay, these are the categories that are going out on each day. And then, breaking it down even further to say, okay, have an SOP around, for instance, when you are giving them pieces of content, like pieces of video, have an SOP around, here's what we want this video turned into. It's going to be turned into a reel. It's going to be turned in, a reel on Instagram. It's going to be turned into a short video on Facebook. It's going to be turned into stories on both of those channels. And the longer video is going to be uploaded to YouTube. So having these checklists and making it really clear, this is going to give you a way to measure, is this stuff getting done? And then your social media manager should be the one who is measuring the metrics and letting you know at the end of the month, right? When you have a sit down with them, and you go over, what do the insights look like? What was successful, and what do we want to repeat, and what do we need to tweak? So I think that would be my bit of advice there. You got to get the SOPs ready to go. Or, I'll add this. I just had a thought. You don't necessarily have to build the SOPs.
Oh, yeah.
In training that person to run the things, have your meetings with them. Maybe for the first couple of months, you are pretty hands-on and you're showing them things. You can record Loom videos. You can do all those things. You can have meetings with them, have them record the meetings, and then have them build the SOPs for you.
Nice.
Let me even just kind of comment on that. I 100% agree with that. In the final few years of my studio, I had a 24-year-old who lived 700 miles away from me, basically running everything behind the scenes for me, so that all I had to do was show up and teach. That is all I did. People have heard me say this before. She even was planning my recitals for me, calling the venue, getting the date set up, making sure the doors were unlocked at the right time, like all that sort of thing. And the way that I did that was I sent her tons of short videos, 5 to 20 minutes long, explaining exactly what the process was. And she basically wrote the manual. And of course, I had to train her on how to write the manual. but she was talented in such a way that she was able to do that. She was very much of an attention to detail person. But yeah, if the goal here is to take things off your plate, nobody is going to be excited to do this if they're thinking, oh, I'm going to be writing a 90-page manual on how to do social media marketing for the school. No, have the people do it, because it's actually a training tool to make them write it. And then you check their work. And if you see something that's off, or you have a question, you either then go to the outside consultant or expert like Sara and say, hey, does this look like this is going to work? Or you go in-house if perhaps you're a bigger school and you have a director of marketing and have that conversation with them. No, I love that piece of advice. Nate, I feel so bad.
No.
Jump in. I'm curious what you've got.
Well, Sara, I so appreciate a lot of these insights. I also kind of want to clarify for our listeners that don't understand the idea of a social media manager, the idea of a CMO, a marketing officer. You're sort of, what I hear you saying basically is, as the founder, we might be that CMO, the visionary. Hey, this is the message, purpose, values, etc. And that as Daniel's talking about, bringing on someone who can actually be the manager. And just to be clear, when you're saying manager, you mean the person who's actually generating, posting, monitoring the content, keeping your metrics dashboard, showing up to that monthly check-in, right? That's what that manager essential role description is.
Exactly. Yeah. So you actually might wear some chief hats that you don't, in the long run, you won't wear. But maybe at first in that hiring process and training process, you might want to be a little bit more hands-on. And exactly, that social media manager is going to be the one who's actually doing it.
Yeah, actually, and we ran into this at Brooklyn Music Factory, where I wasn't really clear on the difference between, the marketing visionary versus the manager, and it was always like, I was like, wait, am I supposed to be finishing this content, or can I just hand this, G Drive folder over, right? So it sounds to me like, and this gets to this team building piece that Daniel was just talking about, you've been really talking about beautifully, which is that if we do this right, they become both a curator and a creator, right? Like you're saying someone's coming, someone is actually becomes that observer and figures out how to celebrate, in addition to creating the content, posting the content, which is very different. I'm going to be honest. I don't think we always did this well at the factory. What we ended up doing was dictating precisely what we wanted, and then honestly, just needing someone to create precisely what we wanted. And so we never truly let go. Right? It's almost like we were, I don't know whether you find that, do you ever find that with schools you're working with or studios you're working with, where kind of the visionary or that CMO person, that founder, can never actually let go of the content? That they're always critiquing it they're always in the weeds?
It's so funny that you say that, because I feel really seen and heard. I am that person. Because I
dig it. Yes.
I have a soft spot. I love creating content. Like I really do, because I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. I love to mess around with graphics. And it's been a hard lesson for me to learn to let go and to trust people on the team, to say, you know what you do might not be the same way that I do it, but what you do is still amazing. And let's sit down and get clear about, like, this is what we're looking for, but I want to give you permission to use your eye and to use your brain to create something good. I think, coming back to what you said about, having somebody come in and be the observer, there's so many ways that studios can do this. Like, let's say for big events, if you're doing big events, certainly hiring somebody from the outside to come in, videographer, photographer, something, to capture things, or having your social media manager going around and doing that stuff. But also, like, on a daily basis, like the day-to-day activities, if you have employees, and that can become part of their job, to say, okay, hey, once a month, we would really like to have some type of content from you. It's like a video of people working in your studio with you, or, can you keep a little notebook in your room where you can like jot down, funny things that happened, or like super cool things that happened, and let them in on the process so that they can start documenting the magic that's happening. Because there's so many opportunities if we can just document it, if we can just write it down or take a video, take a photo. Magic's happening everywhere in your schools.
So, Sara, I think it's an amazing opportunity to get those teachers to capture the magic. I love it. I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm in the studio, 2 days a week, and I'm constantly filming, like you said, little celebratory moments. But one of the pieces of pushback we get often, I'll literally get this from our private lesson director, Ben, who'll be like, Nate, I can't ask them to do another thing. It's enough for the teachers to really just thrive in their role with our unique curriculum, etc. If I then say, hey, and we've tried like multiple tactics to get teachers to do it. And in our case, they're W-2, etc. They're deeply invested in our purpose and our mission, as well. But have you ever come up with any stellar little hacks to get teachers almost like to sort of, it's almost like dupe them into capturing or observing, capturing, and celebrating? Because I'm honestly saying, even at Brooklyn Music Factory, it's been an ongoing pain point.
I think you're right about this, especially because, these teachers, they're busy. They have busy schedules. They probably don't have a ton of time to think about this aspect. And again, like it comes back to most of us as teachers, we are deeply invested in being present for that student. So I think there's two things. One, having an educational meeting about how to balance that and making it fun. And figuring out how can I creatively give people the tools to help them do this. Is it as easy as giving them a tripod in their studio where they can put their phone? Is it setting up a space in your lobby, like a selfie space in your lobby where the student and teacher can use that selfie space depending on, okay, hey, when something amazing happens, we get to go take a selfie. Like we get at the end of the lesson, making it fun, gamifying things. So that can be part of it. And so there's like the two sides, right? Like educating the importance of it and then maybe gamification of it. The third aspect might be maybe considering like if you are going to have a social media manager and they are in-house, having 1 week a month where they are coming in for, a couple of afternoons and, taking the time to document things and having them do it so that your teachers don't have another thing on their plate.
Yeah, totally. And they can actually even just be the observer and interviewer in that moment. Yeah. And I think that was back to sort of Daniel's comment around building systems and your comment around your VA helping with X, Y, and Z. I think one of the things that's I've always intuitively felt as a studio owner that's really hyper focused on building community, that it's really probably appropriate for our social media manager to be part of our community, someone who's coming on site, who gets to know the parents, who really is, in our case is they're in Brooklyn. They're married to the community as much as we are. It's probably not appropriate to have that person be a virtual employee who's just getting her done, but rather who's on the ground.
Well, I'll just add one thing. Like you could also think about splitting up this job. Like maybe the person that you have documenting some of those things is somebody who is in-house that would have the time to do that. And maybe the whole like running the social media stuff isn't in their wheelhouse, but then the virtual assistant can be a part, can do that. I do want to mention one thing because I feel like I forgot to mention it. there's an opportunity too for most schools to establish some way to really encourage user-generated content, meaning content that is coming from your students and your parents. So if you haven't given thought to that, I just want to throw that out there because, we feel like this pressure to create all this content, but don't forget your clients are like the best content creators ever. And if you can come up with ways to either get that content from them or encourage them to create that content and tag your studio, that's taking a little bit of pressure off of you and the social media team.
I want to jump in here and say that you said a very, very important word. Thought. Think. Because this can feel overwhelming, I know, and I know you know, Sarah, because we work with clients. And the way that I began to think about this, because this became real to me, you're going to laugh at this. This is long before I was doing Grow. But I literally was posting on Facebook text posts of kids passing their books for 3 years with no pictures. Almost 3 years. And then in 2013, I read Jab, 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 Right Hook, which was a book about social media marketing and the way good examples and bad examples from brands of how you should be doing social media marketing. Now, this is nearly 10 years ago. Obviously, the rules of the game in some ways have changed, although there are principles that still stay the same. But the way that I thought of it is, and the way that I think school owners should think of it, is put one system in place. Have one type of post, do one particular thing, and then get the systems around that correct, and then do another one. So we've been talking about a lot of different specific tactics or strategy, but these are all things that you could do where you could set up a system. So for me, it looked a little bit like this. I would have students perfect their song at home and get a perfect video recording of a performance, and then have their parent text it to me or send it to me or put it to Google Drive. That's a social media post right there. Well, if one day a month you could set up a quote unquote contest inside your school, hey, who has the best performance? Maybe that's a little too aggressive. Maybe that's a little too competitive. I don't know. But you could get hundreds of videos depending on how many students you have in your school. You could have social media posts for the next year just off of doing that once a year, because you're getting these perfect performances of all these different, songs. Maybe they're pop songs or things of that nature. So you set that up, you get that system correct, and then you move on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. And it really is just about thinking ahead in advance how all this would work. And this is yet another case where I feel like this podcast is just us saying, like, hey, sit down and really think about what you want in advance and don't try to wing it on the fly. Like, that's what every episode of this podcast has ended up becoming over the last 47 odd episodes. But I just wanted to put that out there because I think I'm hearing you speak, Sarah. I'm hearing Nate speak. I'm having thoughts. I'm observing what I'm saying in the midst of this. But that's really what it comes down to: is you are setting up systems, you are thinking in advance, and then you're running that play out of that playbook, and then you're monitoring the results later. And that's what those metrics are that Sara started this podcast talking about. So I just thought I'd interject that in there. I don't know who was getting ready to speak next, but I just want to throw that in there.
I like that. Daniel, it reminds me of the saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And I think a lot of people see marketing and social media and advertising, all this stuff is like this giant elephant. And how am I ever going to eat this elephant? But it's like you said, just get one thing in place, get good at it, get systems around it. And then you can move on to the next thing. And that might feel hard at first, but know that long term, like when you're thinking about what do I want, what's the vision that I want, keep that in mind, and you're going to get there.
Sara, maybe we could close by giving someone a real call to our listeners, rather a real call to action based on some of this great research you did around what channels are parents engaging with. And so let's just give a couple of examples. Let's give one example to start. We keep it simple. Let's say you have a school in a mid-sized city and you're serving ages, classic age range, 4 to 12. That's your age range. Or make it even simpler, 6 to 12. Where are the parents of those students most likely to be found? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? Is it somewhere else we're not even aware? And if we were to just pick a single channel to begin building systems around and get consistent with our content creation, follow your lead around observing and celebrating and serving our existing families first rather than marketing the new ones, what is that channel? What can people focus on?
So you have a couple different age ranges there, although I think there's going to be a lot of nice crossover, right? So when we're looking at, let's think about the parents of you said, was it 6 to 12? Was that one of the age ranges?
Yeah, and maybe we go 6 to 9. If you want to make it focused, you tell us how focused we need to be.
Yeah. So let's consider the 6 to 9.
Good.
And, people are having kids a little bit later now too. Right. So we, keeping that in mind, then you're probably looking at, the age range of like maybe 31 to 39.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the age range that we're looking at. These people are spending their time on Instagram because, I used to think that all of the parents that I currently have or had in the past were on Facebook. It was partially true. And then one day I'm sitting there and I'm talking to one of my teen students and social media came up and she's like, oh yeah, Facebook's for old people. And I was like, oh, okay. That is my like primary platform. So I've just been labeled.
I've just been labeled.
Right. But I would say for the young ones, probably Instagram. I think Instagram is, we have and now it's so funny because kids, Instagram used to be the kids platform. Right. Now they're on TikTok. And now, the millennials, which millennials are not young anymore. We keep equating them with these young people. They're not young anymore. Millennials are invading TikTok.
Interesting.
So I think that if you're looking at like teens and stuff like that, I think a lot of parents are on Facebook, Instagram. If you got the younger students, they are definitely on Instagram as well. And I know it's a channel that I struggle with, but don't count out TikTok. I think TikTok is turning into a YouTube situation where you're going to have a very large age range on there. Right now, it's younger, but that's shifting.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good cliffhanger to leave our episode on. Don't count out TikTok, which is just the kind of overwhelming comment that our listeners will love, where they're like, wait, I was told to focus on Instagram. Anyways, no, I love that. And I love, Sara, that it's research-based. That is something that we keep driving home all the time here on the podcast is like, and that gets back to Daniel's intention comment.
Yeah.
Like, don't fly by the seat of your pants. Do less and do it with good intention and great research behind it, which is what I hear from everything you've been sharing. So thank you so much for that. I love the direction. I'm personally going to take your direction, which is to reinvigorate our Instagram and let go of a lot of the Facebook work that we've been in and just stay in that zone. So I appreciate that guidance.
Oh, you're so welcome. Cool. I look forward to following you on there.
Love it. Hey, Sara, as we end, just where can folks find you? Maybe just as we sign off, where can people find you out on the web?
You can find me, if you look up Savvy Music Studio, just about anywhere, that's where I'm going to be. So, if you want to get a place where you can get all the links, savvymusicstudio.com. And, if you're looking for research about the stats and things like there, I do have a field guide there that you can check out. And so I've done some of the work for you because we don't have time for that.